Now that we wander through Asia's enchanted forests, following foxlights and ghost flames, let's turn our gaze westward. Europe has its own famed deceiver in the dark, one that might sound familiar, the Wheel of the Wisp. Across Europe, countless travelers have told of the Wheel of the Wisp, also known by names like the Friar's Lantern, Jack-o'-lantern, or Ignis Fatuus, or Foolish Fire. This classic folklore phenomenon is described as a faint, flickering light that hovers over bogs, swamps, and marshes, often resembling a distant lantern or torch. The will-o'-the-wisp is notoriously mischievous. It dances just out of reach, and anyone who tries to follow this phantom light finds themselves thrown off the safe road. In the British Isles, traditions hold that these lights are wielded by trickster spirits, sometimes fairies, sometimes the ghost of a sinner, always with the intent to mislead wandering travelers into dangerous wetlands. Those who pursue the wisp invariably end up lost, at best, or at worst, sucked into a bog or falling off a hidden ledge in the dark. The motive is so common that in England, being pixie-led became a figure of speech. The idea was that pixies, a small fairy folk, might invisibly charm a traveler and cause them to lose their way. In fact, the word pixelated, meaning bewildered or confused, comes from this very belief, or having one's wits is scattered by pixie trickery. European folklore is rich with vividly cautionary anecdotes about the will of the wisp. One famous Welsh tale tells of a peasant walking home at dusk who sees a bright light up ahead. He assumes it's a fellow traveler carrying a lantern and follows gratefully for miles. But suddenly, he finds himself on the edge of a vast chasm with a roaring river below. At that moment, the lantern rises high, revealing a dusky little goblin who cackles and blows out the light, leaving the poor man in pitch darkness on the brink of the precipice. This chilling story, imagine the horror as you realize you are being led to a cliff, is a classic example of will-o'-wisp cautionary tale. In some variants, the victim only just manages to scramble back to safety, vowing never again to chase mysterious lights. Yet, interestingly, not all European tales portray the will-o'-the-wisp as purely evil. Few legends say the wisp might guide a kind of virtuous traveler to treasure instead of doom, or that treating the light with respect or insulting it in other cases determines whether it helps or harms you. For instance, in parts of Ireland and Scandinavia, people sometimes thought these lights mark buried gold or the location of fairies' treasure hoard. Only the bold or foolhardy would try to seek such riches. Of course, because one never knew if the light was a friend or a fiend. Europe's folklore also arms travelers with protections against being led astray. One remedy from Channel Island says, if a will-o'-wisp, locally called as faux boulanger, or rolling fire is playing tricks on you, you can stop it in its tracks by turning your coat inside out, a charming parallel to the Filipino advice for tikbalangs or encantos. The logic seems to be invert yourself or do something unexpected to break the spell of misdirection. Another antidote from Scotland is to carry a lantern of your own or walk with one foot in a wagon rut so the pixie light can confuse you as easily. These little folk precautions highlight how seriously people took the threat of getting fairy-led. In an age before GPS or even reliable maps, getting lost in the moors at night was genuinely perilous. So they told stories of malevolent lights to urge everyone to stay on the path and mistrust alluring shortcuts. From the Will of the Wisp and its pixie conspirators, we get a clear symbolic warning. Don't let curiosity, greed, or pride draw you into unsafe places. The foolish fire of the Ignis Fatuus was often interpreted as punishment for the foolish. It's the Ignis Fatuus that gives us the modern metaphor of will-o'-the-wisp goal, something tempting but ultimately unattainable or deceptive, which leads one on a wild goose chase. Indeed, to chase a will-o'-the-wisp in literature is to pursue an illusion. In real life, too, a lost traveler chasing a false light is a poignant image of human misjudgment led by desperation or desire. We've met the flame of San Telmo, the horse trickster, the fox with its lantern, and the wisp in the swamp. But our tour isn't over. Now we venture to the New World. where other tricky beings lie in the wake. In the forests of Latin America lurks a goblin with a penchant for music and mischief, and across the plains of Native America roams a sly coyote with lessons to teach. In the folktales of Latin America, as well as Spain, from which the legend originated, people speak of the Duende, an elusive goblin or elf-like creature whose name literally means spirit or sprite. Duendes are usually small, think knee-high, often depicted wearing a big hat and having a mischievous grin. They can live in houses, caves, or deep in the woods. And one thing is certain, many a missing tool, trip, traveler, or unexplained noise in the night is blamed on those little troublemakers. In fact, entire families of duendes populate Hispanic and indigenous lore, serving various roles from household pests to nature guardians. What's fascinating is that this figure exists here in the Philippines too. Our duendes are also described as tiny, unseen dwellers of anthills, trees, or household corners, often tied to good or bad fortune depending on how you treat them. Just like their Latin America cousins, they're mischievous, sometimes playful, other times vengeful, especially if you fail to show them respect. While South American tales describe duendes luring travelers with tricks or even enchanting music, Filipino folklore warns that angering a duende might leave you with mysterious ailments or disorientation in the forest. These cross-continental similarities show how cultures oceans apart imagine the same kind of being, small, elusive guardians who blur the line between prankster and punisher. One famous variant in Central America is El Duende, sometimes called Tata Duende, known for his magical drumming. Legends say this dwarf-like spirit carries a small drum, and the music he plays is irresistibly enchanting. If you hear an uncanny drumming deep in the jungle, beware. El Duende might be luring you. His rhythms can make people dance uncontrollably or wander toward the source in a trance. There are stories of hunters or farmers who vanish after following the sound of ghostly drums at dusk, never to be seen again. Follow the duende's beat, and you could find yourself lost in the woods until dawn or worse. It's a chilling thought. Music usually represents joy, but here it becomes a siren song leading you away from safety. In some tales, the duende's drum can even summon storms or befuddle your senses, leaving you hopelessly turned around in what was once familiar terrain. Not all duende tricks are so fanciful. Some are more like mean-spirited pranks. Campers and hikers in Latin America folklore often swap stories of how duendes stole their maps or extinguished their campfire, causing them to stray, of course. There's a Central American saying that if you find yourself suddenly unable to find the trail you were just on, or keep coming back to the same spot in the forest, la culpa es del duende. It's the duende's fault. People even joke that when you misplace your keys or drop a tool, a house duende must be playing with you. One colorful account describes the stone duendes of Spain who watch over hills. They stay motionless like little rock statues by day, but if a hiker comes, they'll dart behind boulders, giggling and leading the poor soul in the wrong direction. Lost your map? The duende hid it. Can find the trail markers? Those little rascals might have turned them around when you weren't looking. It's a fun way to explain the very unfun experience of getting lost outdoors. Even the normally rational miners during Latin America's mining booms left offerings for mine-dwelling duendes or tommyknockers, hoping to keep on the good side of any trickster spirit that might cause cave-ins or get them lost in the tunnels. Yet, in true trickster fashion, the duende isn't entirely malicious. Many folkloric traditions give the duende a dual nature, much like the fox can be a benevolent or wicked. In some stories, duendes are actually protectors of the forest and animals, punishing those who harm nature. There are tales of children lost in the jungle who were gently guided back home by a duende, or at least kept safe from predators by the creature until help arrived. In certain indigenous Maya legends, a similar being called an alush is especially a nature spirit, often conflated with duendes, that guards cornfields and leads vandals astray so they can damage the crops. And throughout Latin America, parents have used the duende as a cautionary figure for kids. Don't wander off alone, or El Duende might snatch you. Or be respectful in the forest, or the Duendes will play tricks on you. These little spirits display multiple roles, from the comic trickster who ties travelers' shoelaces together to the stern enforcer who humbles arrogant trespassers. Their enduring presence in oral tradition speaks to a common theme: respect the unknown wilds and keep your wits about you, for there are things out there beyond the human realm. Whether you view duendes as dangerous or darling, one thing's for sure: if you ever hear a mysterious drum in a moonlit forest, think twice before you follow that beat. Finally, we turn to native North America, where one of the Grand Master Trickster of world mythology awaits, a figure so legendary that Trickster might as well be his middle name. Meet Coyote, the wise and foolish wanderer of indigenous tales. Few characters in folklore are as complex and storied as the coyote in Native American traditions, spanning dozens of tribes and regions. Coyotes appear in various forms, sometimes a literal coyote animal who can talk, sometimes a man with coyote features, but almost always as a trickster figure. To the indigenous peoples of North America, Coyote is both a cultural hero and a mischief maker, a being who straddles the line between helping humans, often though inadvertent lessons, and pranking or deceiving them to teach them humility. If there's a rule to be broken or taboo to be tested, Coyote will gleefully do it first, and often suffer comically for it so that humans see the consequences and learn. This makes Coyote's story rich in humor and moral lessons. Unlike the ghostlights or duendes we've discussed, Coyote doesn't rely on single gimmick like a lantern or drum. Shape shifting is one of his powers. Coyote can disguise himself as a handsome young man, a lost friend, even a sacred spirit, if it suits his trick. One Navajo story tells of a coyote disguising himself as a traveler to trick a village into giving him food, only for his greed to undo him when the disguise slips. In many plains and southwest stories, Coyote's voice can throw itself mimicking sounds to confuse people. For example, imitating someone calling for help to lure a curious person away from camp. Coyote might lead a curious traveler off their path, not with a will-o-wisp, but preying on their ego or gullibility.
We all know that feeling. You finally manage to get away on vacation and the worrying starts. Will that bogus "beware of dogs" sign keep your home safe? What about that fake camera you set up? And will someone finally find your old hide and key rock? That's where ADT comes in. All that stuff, it's safe-ish. It seems fine when you don't really think about it, but you know it truly doesn't work. Instead, ADT provides security solutions that keep you actually safe, giving you real peace of mind. Because vacation is supposed to be, relaxing. Don't settle for safe-ish. Visit ADT.com today to learn more.
Telling them tall tales, getting them to chase an impossible goal, or tempting them to do something unwise. For instance, there are tales of Coyote promising a person great powers or treasure if they perform some ridiculous task, only for the person to end up embarrassed and empty-handed while Coyote laughs. In this way, he leads people astray spiritually or emotionally rather than just physically. He might trick someone into betraying a friend or breaking a rule. Just go to see the chaos unfold, and then often utter a crackling Coyote's laugh. Many of Coyote's victims in these stories are those who act arrogantly or foolishly: a proud warrior, a greedy hunter, a disobedient youth. Such characters are prime targets for Coyote's antics, precisely because the stories serve to knock them down a peg and impart a lesson. Folklorists note that trickster tales about Coyote and his analogs in other cultures often reinforce the community's moral code by showing outrageous, exaggerated examples of what not to do. If someone in a story is selfish or boastful, Coyote will ensure that trait leads them into trouble, perhaps by literally leading them on a wild chase. In one Shoshone story, Coyote intentionally misdirects his more respected brother Wolf out of jealousy, causing Wolf to become lost, which ultimately teaches both of them a lesson about pride and respect. Coyote's pranks can be mean, but they tend to contain a kernel of wisdom. Maybe the person he tricked needed to get a little lost in order to find a better path afterward, in a metaphorical sense. This dual nature has led storytellers to compare Coyote to other global tricksters like the Norse god Loki or the West African Anansi. In fact, the idea of the clever fox in Europe, think of Aesop's fables or the medieval Reynard of the foxtales, is often cited as a parallel, a smaller animal unwittingly bigger ones. And recall Japan's kitsune, a cunning, shape-changing animal who tricks proud samurai or greedy merchants. And in the Philippines, we also have pilandok. So it's fascinating that cultures oceans apart came up with such similar archetypes. Coyote, Kitsune, Reynard, Pilandok, they all reflect the timeless notion that wit can triumph over strength, but unchecked pride or folly will always be punished. In Native American lore, Coyote's tricks sometimes literally lead to someone getting lost in the wilderness. There are Apache stories of Coyote moving the stars to confuse a hunter's direction, for example. More often, though, Coyote symbolizes being morally or spiritually astray. He's the voice whispering in your ear to take the easy shortcut or give in to temptation, and when you do, you find yourself in a predicament. Yet, Coyote is not purely an evil figure. Many tribes also credit him bringing knowledge or fire or other gifts to humanity, albeit usually by accident or as the outcome of a prank. This ties into the symbolic interpretation. Encountering a coyote situation in life, being deceived or misled, can ultimately teach you something important. It's a rough lesson, but one you'll never forget. In this sense, Coyote is a teacher through trickery, making people literally or figuratively lose their way so that they learn to appreciate the right way. So, if you ever find yourself hopelessly lost, whether on a hike or just in the journey of life, you might pause and wonder, is Coyote having a little fun with me? And if so, what can I learn from this? Such is the enduring power of this trickster. Having trekked through these legends from around the world, a few powerful themes emerge. For one, these deceptive spirits are nearly always associated with the wilderness, the dense forest, the desolate moor, the stormy sea, the snow-swept mountain. In other words, places where humans feel small, vulnerable, and prone to disorientation. It's no coincidence that the fear of getting lost is at the heart of many of these tales. Before modern navigation, getting lost was a life and death matter. And so we find spirits to blame or warn us for that terror. The stories externalize a very small, real human anxiety. When you're alone in the dark and you veer off the path, it feels like something actively leads you astray. It's easier to say, atik balang trick me, than to admit you simply lost your way. In this way, folklore becomes a mirror of our psychology. Santalmo's flicker and the will-o-wisp clue represent that deceptive glimmer of hope we cling to when we're desperate, even if it's a false hope. They embody the dangers of overconfidence or curiosity. Chase the mysterious light out of greed or pride, and you may end up in mortal danger. The pixie who leads travelers astray until they're pixelated or bewildered is really cautioning against being too sure of oneself in unfamiliar environment. Another common thread is how moral lessons and taboos are wrapped into these myths. Often, the victims are not just random innocents. They might be portrayed as prideful, disrespectful, or failing to heed advice. In many cultures, there's an implied rule: respect the spirits of the land or they'll mess with you. The hunter who doesn't say a prayer before entering the forest, the traveler who insults the idea of fairies, the child who ignores parents and wanders off. These are the ones who get targeted by the deceiving spirit. Trickster tales from the Duende to Coyote have long been used to enforce social norms or values by literally scaring people onto the right path. If you treat a will-o-wisp kindly, perhaps by not staring at it or by staying calm, some tales say it might actually guide you out of the woods instead of into the bog. That implies a lesson. Keep your wits and kindness even when frightened. Conversely, those who arrogantly declare they don't need to prepare for a journey or fail to show humility in nature often become cautionary examples in these stories. In indigenous teachings, for example, a young people are taught that if you don't listen to elders about not traveling alone at night, coyote or the wood spirits will surely trick you. The folklore thus includes practical survival tips. Don't travel alone at night, don't follow random lights, stick to the group, be respectful, and memorable hunting narratives. It's truly fascinating how similar motives surface across continents. What is will-o'-the-wisps, if not a European cousin to the Filipino San Telmo or the Japanese kitsunebi? All are mysterious lights in the dark that play on the universal human tendency to follow light when lost. Likewise, the trickster animals, whether it's a fox, a coyote, or even a pixie taking horse form, often share attributes of shape-shifting, cleverness, and love of pranks. Anthropologists like to point out that nearly every culture has a trickster archetype: coyote, kitsune, anansi, loki, etc., suggesting that this figure speaks to something deep in the human psyche. Perhaps it's our recognition that we can outdo strength, or a way to explain the random chaotic elements of life. Why do bad things happen unexpectedly? Oh, it's that trickster at work. The cross-cultural recurrence of wandering lights especially is almost uncanny. From Britain to Brazil to Borneo, you find legends of ghostly flames that lead travelers to become hopelessly lost. Does that mean people everywhere saw the same natural swamp gases and imagined spirits? Or does it hint that psychologically we all fear the same darkness and invented similar monsters in response? It's a bit of both. These stories, though oceans apart, reflect universal fears and experiences: getting lost, being deceived, straying from what is safe, and they wrap them in the attire of local culture, be it a Christian soul in purgatory holding the light, or a nature spirit in the shape of a firebird, etc. As one folklore scholar put it, such tales reflect the fears, values, and traditions of societies throughout time. On the symbolic level, deceptive spirits often represent our internal misguidance. The notion of being led astray isn't just physical, it's moral and emotional too. When you say someone was led astray by temptation, we're invoking the same imagery as a will-o'-wisp, a tempting light leading one off the righteous road. A kitsune seducing a man away from his family could symbolize the danger of infidelity or illusion. A duende making you dance until you collapse warns of losing control to pleasure or mania. Coyote tricking you into a bad deal highlights how ego or greed can cloud judgment. In this way, the folktales use external spirits as metaphors for the internal spirits we battle: pride, foolishness, temptation, aimless wanderlust. The fear of getting physically lost in the woods becomes a stand in for the fear of losing oneself metaphorically, losing one's moral compass or clarity in life. When you hear about that poor Welsh farmer nearly stepping off a cliff because he followed a phantom light, you can't help but think of a real life situations where chasing an illusion, get rich quick schemes, false hopes can lead one to the brink of ruin. Even in today's world of neon lights and GPS, these deceptive spirits continue to flicker at the edges of our imagination. They've proven to be highly adaptable characters finding new life in modern media, urban legends, and pop culture. For instance, the Filipino San Telmo recently appeared in the hit Netflix animated series 13, where it was reimagined as the fire elemental ally, still an orb of flame, but this time fighting on the side of the protagonist. It's a full 21st century makeover, yet it introduces new audiences to an age-old myth. Similarly, Japan's kitsune have become almost ubiquitous in anime and video games, from the nine-tailed Yubi in Naruto to countless ghost story films where a beautiful stranger might just be a foxy spirit in disguise. If you watch Studio Ghibli's Princess Mononoke, you might recall the wispy Kodama spirits that flicker in the forest, reminiscent of will-o'-the-wisps guiding or misguiding the protagonist. And who can forget Pixar's Brave, where will-o'-the-wisp literally led the heroine through the forest. Our modern storytellers clearly still find these motifs irresistible. In horror and urban legend genres, the theme of "don't follow that light" or "don't trust the kindly old man on the dark highway" is practically a trope. Ghost hunting shows frequently mention spook lights or ghost lights, like the Marfa lights in Texas or the Min Min light in Australia, which are basically today's will-o'-the-wisp, still puzzling observers with floating orbs in the distance. People swap stories on Reddit about the time I followed a weird light while camping and ended up miles off trail, basically reinventing the wheel of these folktales in personal experience form. Somewhere, a folklorist is smiling at the continuity. Cautionary tales remain effective. Parents might not invoke duendes anymore to keep kids wondering. but they'll use the fear of stranger danger or don't go into the woods alone. Different dressing, same core idea. And speaking of duendes, they occasionally pop up in Latin American news or viral videos, with locals claiming to have caught a duende on camera causing mischief, fueling a blend of modern hoax and traditional belief that keeps the folklore alive. Even the trickster Coyote steps onto the contemporary stage now and then. Neil Gaiman's novel America's Gods famously includes a character based on Coyote, teaching hard lessons to a modern man, and in 2021, a Marvel TV series, low-key appropriately, figured a thinly veiled reference to a Native American trickster disrupting timelines. These beings are like cultural shapeshifters themselves. They change form to suit our era, but their core, the role of deceiver and teacher, stays the same. Why do these legends endure? Perhaps because getting lost in all senses is timeless human predicament and will always craft stories to personify our perils. The next time you watch a horror movie where a ghost lures someone into an abandoned house, or read a fantasy novel where will-o-wisp leads adventurers into a trap, recognize it for what it is. The same age-old folklore we've been exploring, just wearing a new mask. These spirits remind us to be cautious of easy allure, whether it's a strange light in the swamp or a too good to be true offer in your inbox. They remind us that sometimes the straight path is the safe one, and sometimes curiosity truly can lead the cat or the traveler into danger. Yet they also add that spice of mystery and wonder, the idea that our world still has unknowns, that not everything can be seen or trusted at face value. As we conclude our journey, imagine again that you're the light traveler in the dark, but this time armed with the wisdom of these tales. You pause before stepping off the trail. The light twinkles invitingly ahead, but you recall the tikbalang, the kitsune, the will-o'-the-wisp. Instead of chasing the light, you pull out a compass. Sometimes the modern tools do outshine folklore. Or perhaps you remember an old trick and flip your jacket inside out for good measure. In the distance, you almost think you hear a frustrated sigh, a trickster spirit foiled of its fun tonight. You've outsmarted the deceivers, at least this time. With a steady heart, you find your way back to familiar ground. And as you safely reach home, you might just whisper a thank you to the old stories that guided you. Tales of San Telmo, Kitsune, Duende, will-o'-wisp, and Coyote, those eternal lanterns lighting the path of wisdom through the forests of fear. But remember, the world outside our stories still has its own San Telmos and Duendes, bright lights that promise progress, smiling faces that pledge prosperity, yet too often, what waits behind the glow is only shadow. Lavish feasts that turn to rot, gilded palaces revealed as hollow caves. The trickery in these myths is not so different from the trickery we face today. And so the warning endures. Don't be dazzled too quickly. Don't follow blindly. For not every light is meant to guide you. Some are meant to burn you. And that's where we'll leave our lanterns for tonight. From San Telmo's wandering flames to the kitsune's foxfire. From the duendes who giggle in the dark to the will-o'-the-wisp flickering over the swamps. The world has always whispered the same warning. Not every light is meant to guide you. Some are meant to deceive. If you enjoyed this episode of Lil Weird, I'd love for you to share it with a fellow curious soul. Follow the podcast so you never miss a journey into the strange. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leaving a review really helps this little show reach more wandering travelers like you. You can also find Lil Weird on Instagram for extra weird bits, or support the podcast through my Coffee page. Links are always in the show notes. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and most of all, keep your wonder close. Thanks for listening.